Does doing the right thing come at the cost of business performance? Can ethics and profit coexist? Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast. Join host Kaumudi Goda for candid conversations with industry luminaries as we navigate the maze of decision-making in today's global workplace. Each episode offers a window into the minds of leaders achieving remarkable outcomes while balancing diverse priorities and stakeholders. Tune in for thought-provoking insights and actionable strategies on leading with ethics every day. Because in the pursuit of excellence, integrity matters.
Our guest today is Lenora Billings-Harris. Lenora is the founder and CEO of Critical Voices Initiative, a not-for-profit movement that helps people from all walks of life use honest words, open minds that build stronger communities. Before founding this organization, Lenora held leadership positions within 2 Fortune 100 companies and a major university. She worked for over 35 years as a diversity and inclusion strategist and specialized in helping organizations make diversity, equity, and inclusion a competitive advantage by disrupting bias. Lenora is the author of 2 books and numerous articles, and she's included amongst the top 100 thought leaders on diversity by Society of Human Resource Management. She's the past president of the Global Speakers Federation and past president of the National Speakers Association, USA, the first African American to hold those positions. In 2022, Lenora received an honorary PhD for her research and global work, and in 2024, she received the International Ambassador Award in recognition for her impact around the world. Lenora was inducted into the Speakers Hall of Fame in 2018, again a first as an African American woman. Although she's the first at many things, her joy comes when she sees that she is not the last. Hi, Lenora. Welcome to our studio.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here and be with you.
I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time, so I'm so glad I get to share your wonderful wisdom, warmth, and such a global experience with all our listeners. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Lenora, you've had a tremendous global career and you continue to do different kinds of work around the world, including speaking, writing, and mentoring. And I've always wondered, is there a red thread that ties all of it together for you? What's the driving force behind all that you do and all that you've done?
I had the good fortune of going to South Africa for the first time in 1991, not long after Nelson Mandela was freed. I had the opportunity before then, but I chose not to go until he was freed. And then I went to South Africa for 3 weeks at a time, twice a year for several years. And on one of those trips, I learned the proverb Ubuntu. Ubuntu, which is a sort of philosophy through many African countries, but I learned it in South Africa. And it's a Zulu tradition, and it means I am because we are. And when I learned that, I felt I had just learned my purpose on this planet. I really felt that what it signifies is that we not only are all connected as human beings, what I do impacts you and what you do impacts me, regardless of whether we know each other. That it just struck me to my core. And so my business has always used Ubuntu as a foundation. So as it relates to the question of mentoring and speaking and writing books, my belief is that most people will do better when they know better, not everybody, but most people. And from a Ubuntu perspective, if I can, as a diversity strategist, as a speaker, etc., if I can help my audiences understand people different from them more readily, then perhaps we all will get along better. Perhaps we all will understand each other better. So that's obviously that's not what I say from the platform. Even when I'm writing about it, I don't actually say it quite that way. But that is what comes from my heart. And that's what motivates me to do what I do.
That's profoundly beautiful for me to hear. And as a DI professional and leadership consultant, one of the dilemmas for me has also been about when you reach out to connect with people, Lenora, and empathize with them and feel compassionate towards them. And the driving force is to bring people together and identify with them. How do you also maintain your own individuality and protect your own inner flame? In other words, I have seen you walk that path so beautifully in feeling that sense of connectedness while also maintaining your own sense of integrity and ethics, especially when the world is such a layered, complex place and there's so many wicked problems that I know you've been involved in trying to solve and bring to resolution. And so, in that context, what do the terms ethics and integrity mean to you?
Mm. Well, to me, what ethics really mean is that I will do the right thing, whatever I deem to be the right thing. I will do the right thing even when no one's watching. Because as you know, ethics and the law are not the same thing. So it's not about not breaking the law. Ethics is what is the right thing to do. So in my mind, it's what is the right thing to do given the people involved, given the circumstances. And I have to think about answering that question from the perspective of everything involved in the decision. So not just what's going to be the egotistical thing to do. And I think, at least in my work, what I have come to know is that when people understand how their biases have come about or why they even have biases, then they're a little more open to learning because they understand that it's not about being a bad person. It's how we have all been impacted through how we are raised, where we live, the various cultures, and that kind of thing. So if whatever our beliefs are, we can look at the world or community or our business and recognize there is a human way to do this, to make whatever decision is there, then that would be the ethical thing to do, the thing closest to the truth, whatever the truth is. Now, I know people will debate what the truth is these days. And then integrity to me means doing what I promised to do. So being willing to not overpromise. And what you had asked me earlier is, more or less, and how do I show up still as an individual? How do I do all of that and still be an individual? And my honest answer is I only know how to do me. However, I am always in admiration of people who have that sense of knowing who they are from an early age. I think more of us are concerned about what other people think. We're concerned about being judged or looking silly, that type of thing. And so we're constantly trying to let me do what they want me to do. When in fact, what I have come to know now, having been doing this work for so long and given my age, we are our most powerful self when we are being who we are. And each of us is an individual. There's no two of us alike. I know we all know that. But it sometimes takes a while to figure out what that is. I know when I first started speaking in particular, I started my business way back in 1986, but I didn't start speaking as like a keynote speaker. I was delivering workshops, but when I started to at least want to do keynotes, I often would hear the message from other people who had come before me, oh, be your authentic self on the platform. And frankly, I really was thinking, what is that? I mean, I'm just being me, but what is my authentic self? And what I learned over time was to pay attention to the way other people describe me so that I can pick from those descriptions what really fits for me. And for me, it has become easier over time to be more comfortable being who I am, doing what I think is right for me and for others, and being more intentional on setting boundaries. That helps me stay in my individual space and in my lane.
I think that's a fantastic key to a young person, or really any person who's searching how to find themselves and keep that intact, because it is such a difficult world to do that, particularly in a profession like speaking, where really there is tremendous temptation to be like a chameleon, to mold yourself to sound like how your clients want to sound, depending on what sector, industry, what type of leadership team you're working with. And so that's a terrific insight to, if you're not already able to connect with who you are, listening to what others experience you as and picking the parts that resonate deeply with you. I think that was a terrific, perhaps, blueprint.
And you can also let go of those descriptors they may have used that you don't want for yourself. So it's both.
Yes, it need not be that you accept every label that people want to give you. You can reject the ones that don't fit who you want to be, who you are, and therefore it's perhaps always fine tuning, always keeping it with the flow as you are evolving, because we all do. We all evolve. I thought what you talked about in terms of ethics and integrity, on finding out the context and understanding what is the right thing to do while being aware that it might be subjective in terms of ethics, and integrity being doing what you said you would, are both wonderful definitions of ethics and integrity. I know that you yourself are really working on ethics right now. Can you tell us a little bit about the role you're currently involved in that sense?
Yes, well, I have been a member of the National Speakers Association for many, many years and have been fortunate to sit in various leadership positions, including having been a past president of the association. And for those of you listening and watching that are not familiar with National Speakers Association, it is an organization for people who use the spoken word for part of or all of their income. And when I say spoken word, actually, it's broader than that. So it's really for people who write books, who have podcasts, who deliver keynotes, workshops, are consultants, all of those things that surround using words, so to speak, as part of your enterprise. And our organization not only teaches people how to be more effective on the platform, is the way we would describe it. That platform could be a book or it could be a podcast, again, whatever avenue you take. We also, our real focus is to help people know how to do this as a business. So, what are all the things involved? In any case, at this point in my career and in my involvement with them, I am the ethics chair for the association. And Um, it's quite an honor to have been asked to do this, because I know that means that the leadership, the board of directors, trust me enough to do the right thing, to handle complaints that might come in a way that matches what our ethics policy is. In fact, we rewrote it all last year, just so that our members could understand it better. Because it is a challenging thing, especially in this world of AI and so many things going on. How can you be ethical as a professional speaker, or as a leader for that matter? And there's no one simple answer to that, other than what I gave earlier is what in your soul is the right thing to do, not just the legal thing to do. But even with that, one person thinks this is the right thing to do, and another person may think differently. And what I go back to, and what I share with my colleagues and my clients when this type of thing comes up, is we need to be clear about two things. We as leaders, we need to be clear about what our own personal values are, and we need to be clear about what the organization's values are. And so often, although my area of focus is not ethics, so often when I'm doing my own research relative to inclusion and equity and that type of thing, and I ask people, what's the organization's values? They don't know. Mm. And even when I ask leaders that, it is written somewhere, but it's so obtuse that no one really knows it. When we don't know what our values are, we have no guidance on what our behavior should be. So when we're clear about our values, the ethics becomes an easier part, because a situation comes up and we can then say, how does this relate to what our values are? And I think there's such an example of that right now in the world, not just in the US. Most people know how chaotic we are right now, but even beyond the US, how our leaders are saying one thing but doing another. And so from my perspective, is this going to uplift humanity? Is this going to serve our organization or our country or our community or our family? Is it going to serve the way we most intend, not for our ego, but for the good of everyone? And, some people really don't care about the good of everyone. They're still stuck in their ego. But if we could just get, and it takes some work to get clear on your values, what your values are. It's not just what other people say. It may not even be what your parents or guardians might have taught you. But it is worth the work to be with yourself and identify what's really important to you, because that then can guide the rest of your behavior.
Thank you so much for that. To know what your values are, or the values of an organization, and use that as a guiding light to navigate you through uncertainty is a fantastic starting off point. And one of the things I'm trying to do through this podcast, Lenora, is also shine a light on the fact that navigating through such ethical dilemmas and staying aligned to that sense of integrity is achievable and feasible for everybody, regardless of the power dynamic. Mm-hmm. As a leadership consultant in your global career, you would have worked with so many powerful people, helping them perhaps handle some really, truly wicked, complicated problems. And so, as you did that, have you ever experienced a power dynamic where it would have been legitimate to feel lost and feel perhaps that you don't have full sway over what decisions are made? And I ask if you could share an example of when you yourself faced an ethical dilemma and how you dealt with it, because it might help other people who feeling similarly, perhaps less powerful in the situation, figure out how to do that.
Mm-hmm. So two things come to my mind. One that's personal and one that I helped a client work through. So, again, my area of focus for the last many years has been diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I was working with a client actually delivering a workshop. So I didn't start out as a consultant, although it elevated to consultancy. What came to my attention is, although the client had very clear goals and aspirations about inclusion, so not just diversity, but also inclusion, because diversity means different, just bringing people together who are different. And that's not enough. We bring people together who are different, then we need to do the work so that they can be included, that the team will work effectively together and that type of thing. In any case, with this client, they took great pride in advertising to the world, really, that they were a diverse and inclusive organization. And internally, the culture appeared to be that way, that employees, team members really felt a part of this organization and were very proud to tell people they worked there. So that's the good news. Then one day, what happened was an account representative called on a client, and it was a new client for him, but not a new client for the organization. This was a long-term client. So here was this new account manager, a man. Every time he called on this client, who was also a man, an older man, so I would say the account manager, as I'm thinking about it now, was probably in his late 20s. The client was probably in his late 50s or older. So we have a cultural difference as well. But every time this account manager would show up, the client felt like he needed to tell a joke to lighten up the air. And this was a $1 million client. But the jokes that he told also always were off color. They usually had something to do with being gay, making a negative comment about gay people. So finally, this account representative, though he was afraid, he went to his manager and told the manager what was going on and how uncomfortable he was. And the fact is, the account manager, it did not matter whether he was straight or gay. He was uncomfortable because he knew the values or the supposed behaviors within the company that kind of thing would never be tolerated. And he went to his manager, not knowing what she, happened to be a female, what she would do. And she did the right thing. She decided to call on the client. And this was at great risk because the client could have said, okay, I'm going to pack up my money and go somewhere else. She called on the client, explained that his behavior was not acceptable. The client wanted to know, well, why? Is he gay? Does that what? And she answered in the right way. She said, what his sexuality is has nothing to do with the matter. Your behavior is what we're focusing on, and your behavior is not acceptable for our employees, our team members. She wasn't sure whether or not this client was going to be offended and take his business elsewhere. He didn't. They kept the account. Certainly it made the account representative feel fabulous that the company lived up to what its values were regarding their employees. He asked not to have that client again, although she would have allowed him to stay with that client and work with them, but let's be realistic. That relationship probably would not have gone very well. And so by his asking, as opposed to management always wanting to move the person who was offended, that she did move him to, gave him another equal size account. So he did not suffer in any way. I was thrilled that the client, in this case, the manager, reached out to talk to me ahead of time just to get my perspective on what she should do. But she already knew that she just needed validation, and she also knew the risks. But fortunately, even if they had lost the account, as the story was told, the company would have stayed behind her because she followed up. She did what the company expected. And that doesn't always happen, because money speaks so loudly that, oftentimes, oh, we're going to keep this employee because yes, he upsets, or she upsets everybody, but they're a great producer. Well, is that really living up to what you said your values are and what your ethics are? In regards to a personal example, this popped into my head right away after you asked this question. Years ago, so way before we were using internet, and definitely way before we had apps, or airlines had just moved to paper tickets that were not the more cardboard, thicker tickets, the ones that we get if we ask them to print something out. They didn't use that. I mean, they had them, but you could get your ticket. I think, if I'm remembering right, you could print out your ticket online, and it almost looked like, it wasn't a laser printing of it. It was the bubble, whatever they call that before then. In any case, my contract with a client, I was delivering several workshops for them, and I was flying across country to do this a couple of times a month. And in my contract, they agreed to pay coach fare for the airline ticket. The person who was doing my bookkeeping at the time interpreted that different than I did. So fortunately, I caught this before she sent it, sent the invoice to the client. She, instead of charging the airfare that I actually paid, she charged the full coach airfare, even though I got a discount. And the ticket, because you did have to show a receipt. That's what it was. The receipts, the tickets looked the same, but the receipts, you could massage them easily. I'll put it that way. She created a receipt that looked very legitimate, but it had the full coach amount on it. And so when I'm reviewing my expenses before we sent in the invoice, I asked her about it, and she said, well, your contract said you'd be paid, let's say the ticket was $500. Your contract says they'll pay full coach fee. I said, yes, but I'm not trying to make money from expenses. I charge my fee based on what I deliver. And so you need to change that and put the actual amount. And we had to discuss this a little bit because she really felt that she was doing the right thing. This is legally what was in the contract. And I said, I would just not feel comfortable, because to me, that would be unethical. And of course, she changed it, and she never did it again. And she would not have benefited from it. So it's not like the money was going in her pocket. She was doing it on my behalf. So, I didn't feel like it was a big enough issue that I didn't want to work with her anymore. And although, eventually she moved on to do some other things, but that was a personal example of Yeah, it technically could have been legal, but I would just not have been comfortable. And frankly, if my client ever found out that what we did, I don't think they would be too happy either.
That's a fantastic example because as professionals, you wear multiple hats at any given time. You are a consultant, you're a subject matter expert, you're also a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have to worry about keeping the lights on and keeping the revenues high. And there is always such a push and pull and tremendous pressure that people experience in trying to focus on the P&L, right? And
Mm-hmm.
ethics and integrity are also about, as you correctly pointed out right in the beginning when you defined it, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one's watching. That is a personal sense of ethics, and those are values that you define for yourself as an individual, a professional, a business owner, and doing it even when no one else would have found out.
Exactly. Exactly.
Both as a leadership consultant and advisor to many organizations, but also as an acclaimed speaker, what do you feel are ethical dilemmas most relevant to leaders today? And what would your
Mhm.
advice be in such situations?
I really do believe it goes back to values again. I do believe that um, that is what so many leaders are struggling with, whether it's within their organizations, whether it's um, politically in their countries, as we look at the various things that are going on around the world. Um, and I often wonder, well, if you do this, what do you say to your children?
Mm.
Even if you don't have children of your own, when they ask you, what do you say to your nieces, your nephews, your friends' kids, when they ask you about these things, when you have done something that would hurt so many people, or would disadvantage so many people? Um, I struggle with trying to understand why some people are so stuck with the short term, what they believe is the short term immediate reward for doing things that clearly long term will hurt many. I struggle with why that is such a difficult decision to make. Um, and one of the things that I've chosen to do in helping people get clarity around that is I believe part of the issue is that in today's world, we are so in our own silos. We only only pay attention to certain social media. We only watch certain TV shows or news feeds instead of the plethora out there. Now, we can't look at everything, but I like to go to sources that I agree with. I also like to go to sources that I totally disagree with so that I can understand their perspective. They don't convert me, but at least I understand their perspective. And I think in today's world, excuse me, today's leaders are so pressed to produce whatever it is they're supposed to produce. They are not taking the time to get a perspective from more than one viewpoint. And consequently, it's raising their stress level. It certainly raises the stress level of others. And to do that, to have the willingness to get more information, to listen to different perspectives, to talk to different people, means you have to have a beginner's mindset. That is to say, when you reach out to someone whose perspective might be different than yours, your job, especially as a leader, is to listen, not just wait for the period at the end of the sentence so you can jump in and try to convince them that they're wrong. And most of us as adults will listen to a perspective that we don't agree with, and we're just ready to convert that person, which isn't going to happen anyway, certainly not in one conversation. But the more we can make the time to learn from other people, I think the better off we would be individually and certainly in our communities and our organizations. So what I have decided to do personally is to help people have critical and difficult conversations. That is to teach them the skills to have those conversations. Because what I've learned over time, when I used to ask the question, and I've asked this to thousands of people at this point, when I would ask the question, so what holds you back from speaking, having a conversation, a dialogue about diversity or racism or sexism or, any of those isms? What holds you back? And the answers always are, I don't know the right thing to say. I'm afraid I'm going to be judged. And by the way, we're going to be judged anyway, because human beings can't not judge other people. So we're going to be judged. So we might as well let that one go. But I don't know the right thing to say. I'm afraid I'm going to be judged. And I don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. Well, if we had better skills for these difficult conversations, we wouldn't have so much anxiety, because we could go into those conversations by really being curious rather than judgmental, with the intention of coming out knowing more than we did when we went in. And that could lead to, and I know it does, it leads to better decisions. It is a monumental task, of course, but I know that there are many people around the world who have similar feelings that I do in that same regard, and we each have to find what is mine to do. What is it for me that I can do? And I think with my skill set, that's something I could do.
There's so much to unpack in that response. Well, first of all, I'm really excited for this new initiative that you've spoken about in the years since we first began talking and interacting. I've also seen in all of our interactions, you do bring this energy of appreciative inquiry. You know very well who you are, and you have, I noticed tremendous clarity in your viewpoints. At the same time, you're a wonderful listener, Lenora. You're very happy to listen to someone else's viewpoint and really explore why they're thinking what they're thinking, and respect that that's their journey. I've experienced this personally. But at the end of the conversation, when asked, what do you think, Lenora, you usually have a pretty clear perspective about what you feel about the situation. And I think that's a wonderful balance, both appreciating someone else's way of thinking and their journey that brought them to that way of thinking, while also not losing yourself in other people's narratives, but holding on to your own journey, the sum total of all of your experiences and thinking and education and skills that you've picked up. Another thing that I've noticed that you do beautifully is in all of our conversations so far, and in our previous conversations as well, you think along all spectrums of experiences. I noticed that you said someone might not know because they've only immersed themselves in that bubble or echo chamber where they only hear what their worldview already is. You also said maybe it triggers people and they're unable to tolerate something different. So people who are not staying inside the bubble, but they have very triggered responses, which keeps them unable to, holds them back from being able to be present, right? You said, as soon as someone stops talking, if that's your cue, to immediately try and preach to them and convert them. And finally, the last one is those of us perhaps who worry about saying the wrong thing, because while things continue to evolve and change, there was a tremendous overhang of cancel culture until very recently. It became very radicalized. And I know a lot of leaders were concerned about them being perceived as ambassadors for their organizations, for their positions, for their teams, and therefore holding a clear viewpoint became somewhat of a danger. And so people hid behind obscure, not being clear enough, not holding a certain viewpoint, always having well, better have a backup plan to anything. I love that you covered all types of people and all types of fears or responses, right? And how then do you navigate through that? Can you tell me how you have always done this balance so beautifully, where you are an appreciative inquirer into other people's ways of thinking while also holding your own sense of self so firmly and with such clarity? I think that's a thing of beauty. So, is there a book, a quote, anything that inspires you, that encapsulates your philosophy towards this?
Yes. There's two things that come to mind. Just one is just something that I say regularly, but and the so you could kind of say both of them are quotes, but they're things that both are things that I think about often. The first one is speak up even when your voice cracks. That is, don't be silent because you think other people are going to judge you or that type of thing. Now, of course, I mean, speak up with respect and that type of thing. I'm not advocating being cruel in any way, but be willing to speak up because your voice is needed. And speak up even when your voice is cracked, of course, means even when you're afraid. That piggybacks on my favorite quote by Marianne Williamson. Now, she's written up, it's a whole long piece, but the part of it that resonates most with me is, and I'll paraphrase it because I know I won't get it exactly right, but she says, playing small serves no one. Let your light shine. Let your light shine. And I received that quote, the whole quotation, from a friend of mine just as I was going into the presidency for the National Speakers Association. And it would, I believe there are no accidents. It was exactly when I needed it. So when you asked me a couple of times, how do I stay so clearly in my space regarding who I am? That certainly has not been my whole life. It gets stronger and stronger as I get older and hopefully as I get wiser. But during those times when I wonder, oh, should I do this or should I do that based on the circumstances and what will people think? And certainly at my age at this point, and I've made reference to it a couple of times, I'm going to be 75 this year, and I treasure every year. Some people make jokes about being older or they don't want to fess it up. It's better than the other alternative. So I am blessed and grateful that I will soon be 75. So my point is, as I have gotten older, I realize I have no one else to please but myself. And at the end of the day, I have to be happy with who I am. So speaking up, even though my voice might crack, speaking up comes in many different ways. So it's not necessarily always verbalizing. It certainly doesn't mean that the moment something happens that you disagree with, that you jump right in. You have to pick your battles, and also the timing to manage your emotions. But for Marianne Williamson's quote, playing small does not serve anyone. So often, especially as women, we're socialized to play small. We're socialized to let other people's light shine and not ours too much because it might outshine someone else. Well, guess what? There's plenty of space on this planet for all of us to shine. And my friend Jana Stanfield wrote a song that you can find it on YouTube. Jana Stanfield, Stanfield is her last name. And the song is All the Good is the name of the song. And the refrain that just keeps repeating in it is, I can't do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good I can do.
that. So beautiful. All three that you shared are so beautiful. I know I benefit so much from following your work. For our listeners around the world, if they want to stay in touch with you, learn as you share your work, or invite you to their events, where might they find you? What's the best place to find you, Lenora?
The best place to find out what's going on with me right now is my website, criticalvoicesinitiative.org. You'll find me on other websites as well, but the work that I'm doing now around critical voices is criticalvoicesinitiative.org, and also on LinkedIn. So if you just type in my name, Lenora Billings-Harris, Lenora Billings-Harris, you'll find my LinkedIn page. And I do write an article every week that is, as they call it, a LinkedIn newsletter. So you can follow what I'm writing there. And that really LinkedIn is the social media that I'm most active on. I am, on Facebook and Instagram and that type of thing, but quite honestly, I don't do very much with it.
I've signed up for your newsletter and I love your weekly missives. As I was sharing with you earlier, I find that you speak to a truly global audience. You break down concepts while not assuming that anyone might already know that beforehand. So it's, I think, a very inclusive newsletter. Thank you so much for sharing your work. And thank you so much for this lovely conversation. I know I'm going to be hearing it again and again. And to all our listeners, I'm going to be sharing all of the links and the quotations and the book references that Lenora has given. Thank you so much, Lenora. I love this.
Thank you. My pleasure. This has been fabulous. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
As we wrap up today's discussion on the human conversation on leadership and ethics, it's clear that integrity and ethics are the cornerstone of leadership. Host Kaumudi Goda thanks you for joining us in this vital dialogue. Before you go, hit that subscribe button and become a part of the community dedicated to ethical leadership. Share your thoughts and continue the conversation with #TheHumanConversationPodcast.